Born in 1912, the fifth of 10 children, Albert Roode's direction in life was established by what he was told in Sunday school at age 13 in Donora, Pennsylvania. At about the same time his father passed away from a ruptured ulcer, Albert learned of another tragedy that took place halfway around the world. The story was of a Presbyterian medical missionary, Dr. Howard Buchanan, who was stationed in the South Sudan. While attempting to pry open a child's eyelids sealed shut by infection, pus squirted into Dr. Buchanan's eyes. Despite frequent attempts to flush those eyes, the missionary went blind. Barely a teenager, young Albert Roode vowed in Sunday school to become a physician and traveled to the Sudan where he would fill the vacancy left by Dr. Buchanan. Yet no one in his family had ever been to college, much less medical school. Never mind that it was the depths of the Great Depression and that the fatherless Roode family barely had enough money to survive. But fate would intervene for the man who married the former Ruth Gearing in 1939. It was 1931 when an amazing sequence of events began to unfold. First, he received a scholarship for $200 from a foundation. Then the pastor at his church persuaded 10 members of the congregation to donate $30 each so that Albert could go to college. Muskingum College in New Concord, Ohio was suggested by the pastor. Yet replacing Dr. Buchanan was still a dream. In 1935, Albert received word that he'd been accepted at Western Reserve Medical School and that they needed $100 immediately to secure his place. How was he to make it to the Sudan when he couldn't even afford medical school? With thoughts of Africa and medical school in his head, Albert was sweeping the halls of Muskingum one night when he met the president of that institution. When told of Albert's goal and his difficult financial situation, the president wrote a personal check. Albert was going to medical school and later to war. Before he became a medical officer in the Navy aboard the destroyer USS Quick, Albert had to live a life of poverty while in med school. The only student in his class who had to work odd jobs to pay tuition, he lived in a shelter for the homeless and later in the basement of the pathology department adjacent to the morgue where he worked in the animal hospital. He also sold his blood to the hospital blood bank for $25 a pint. With med school and World War II finally over, Dr. Albert Roode, Ruth, and their young family set sail for Africa aboard an Italian transport ship captured by the Allies. In October of 1946, the Roodes arrived at Dolab Hill and lived in the same home that Dr. Buchanan had occupied when he had his tragic accident. Vacant since the accident, its cement floor still had the potassium permanganate stains from Dr. Buchanan's futile effort to save his eyesight. Finding a dilapidated building that would serve as his first clinic, Albert first had to evict many bats and a large family of king cobras. After a few years at Dolab Hill, Albert decided to move further south so that he could serve people in even more remote locations. First he went to Okobo and finally to Pibor Post where he would serve the Murle people. When the Roodes first arrived via motorboat in 1952, there were no facilities at all, just brush and trees on a few knolls of higher ground. Word of his arrival spread quickly. His first patients arrived the next morning. For several months, patients were treated in a clinic under a tree. Locals were hired to clear the land. The first home for the Roodes was erected, a single-room grass hut. Work soon began on a permanent home for the family. As soon as one room in the permanent home was finished, the Roodes moved in so that the original grass hut could be converted into a clinic. With a home clinic and many patients, Albert turned his attention to building a permanent hospital using the British Arcan method of building, a facility that would replace this clinic. Following the Arcan process, a steel frame and galvanized roof is erected during the dry season. Then a conventional cement block building is constructed under a protective roof during the rainy season. His dream finally fulfilled, Albert continued his missionary work in the new hospital. The Roode clan, which included sons Peter and Philip, both of whom would become doctors, John and daughter Janet were there to provide support. But the comfort the family felt in their new home would be shattered in 1964 when all Westerners were evicted by the fundamentalist government. What then ensued were 2 long civil wars in which some 2.5 million people perished and another 4 million fled to neighboring countries. Forced to return to the United States, Albert spent many years working as a physician at the Polk State School for the Mentally Retarded in Pennsylvania and later in an emergency room. Unable to return to the land and people he loved, Albert would send money to select gifted Murle children, paying for their education in Kenya. Many of those children are now ordained ministers in the South Sudan. Dr. Albert Roode passed away in October of 1999. Yet his memory lives with the Murle people. their children, and their children's children, who gave him the native name Lukoranyong, exemplifying the impact a solitary life, well lived, can have on planet Earth. Today, the goal is to keep the dream of the 2013 inductee into the Medical Mission Hall of Fame alive. The hospital Albert constructed in Pibor was badly damaged in the two civil wars. This is how it looks now. Albert's son Peter, a retired surgeon, has unretired and is now following in his father's footsteps as a medical missionary. Working with 2005 Medical Mission Hall of Fame inductee Dr. Glenn Galehood and the organization Mission to Heal, Peter has traveled to the place where he grew up to not only provide assistance to the Morley people, but to begin the process of repairing and restoring the hospital his father built. It's a goal, unfortunately, that has been delayed because of ongoing strife in the region. As his memory lives on, the Medical Mission Hall of Fame is proud to welcome Dr. Albert G. Roode as a member of the class of 2013.